Thank you, worship team. Do I sound weird?
Maybe it's just me every time I try to speak. Welcome, everyone. Those of you who don't know me, my name is Brian. I have the honor of serving as a senior pastor of our church. So if this is your first time or returning for the second time or third time, I welcome you. I always look forward to worshiping with you. And it's good to see some old faces. Not that they're old, but they've been here for a long time. And it's good to see Kiyoung and Emily here joining with us today. So if you didn't see them, make sure you say hi to them afterwards. Pastor Kiyoung used to serve here with me, so I'm very excited to have him here join us. He has a baby now too, so make sure you say hi to the baby too. But today, for the remainder of our time, we're gonna continue our gospel project series. Last Sunday we talked about the battle of David and Goliath, right? Today we're gonna fast forward to chapter 24 of 1 Samuel, where you will see David, he's on a run. So let me just kind of catch you up, okay? So since we don't have time to talk about every single chapter and all the details, after the epic battle that we covered last Sunday against Goliath, we would expect David's victory would open the door for him to just go straight into sitting on that throne that he was anointed for. But unfortunately, as you and I know, it didn't work out that way. It didn't. Instead of entering into the kingship, his life actually became more miserable. As Saul became increasingly paranoid and jealous to the point where he attempted to kill David multiple times. He sent soldiers to his house, which was, by the way, his daughter's house, and David escaped through the help of Saul's daughter. Once again, Saul tries to kill David, and guess who helped? Saul's son, Jonathan, helped David escape. And that covers chapters 18 and 19. And from chapters 20 to 23, right before we get to today's chapter, Saul is chasing David as David and his men are running away. Saul came very close to capturing David, but had to turn back to take care of the Philistines as they came and attacked. And that's the end of chapter 23. But now we come to chapter 24. We see Saul brought 3,000 men, able young men, it says, to capture and kill David and his men. And that's where we are today. As we'll see that David has an encounter with Saul while hiding in a cave with his followers. So with that, let me just read a couple verses from chapter 24 of 1 Samuel. After Saul returned from pursuing the Philistines, he was told, David is in the desert of En-Gedi. So Saul took 3,000 able young men from all Israel and set out to look for David and his men near the crags of wild goats. He came to the sheep pens along the way. A cave was there, and Saul went in to relieve himself. I mean, you know what that means, right? He had to go poo-poo, right? David and his men were far back in the cave. It's just funny sometimes, when you read the Bible, like they have some stories like this, you're like, whoa, okay. Like, is that really? Like God had to really write about this? So at this moment, it's kind of funny, but it's real life situation where Saul maybe he really had to go, right? Oh. Okay. Does it sound better? I think that sounds a lot better, but anyway. Anyway, so he had to use the restroom. So what happens is Saul left all his bodyguards, because bodyguards don't follow you into a cave. So there was a random cave they found. So Saul goes into this cave, which happened to be the cave that David and his men were hiding in. And you will guess that this cave was pretty big and spacious, and they were hiding far in the back as they saw Saul doing his thing, right? What would you have done in this very moment? If you are David running away for your life, and here is this man Saul trying to come and kill you, what would you do as he's taking his business
and you have an opportunity to do something about it. As we continue to read in the passage today, what I want to focus on today is to see and recognize the fierce battle that happens in David's heart and mind. See, we thought, or at least I thought, the biggest battle that David fought was against Goliath. Actually, you know what? I think this particular moment is probably a bigger battle, internal battle. Oftentimes, the battle that we fight against the enemy that we see is easier because we can identify the target. We see it. But oftentimes, the battles that we fight inside us are harder ones to fight. The battle within us are more challenging to overcome because in many ways, we're fighting against our own will. And we often surrender to feelings of anger, frustration, greed, hopelessness, and you name it. And that's what I want to focus on today, the battle within us. So let's continue on and read what happens. Verse 4, the men said, "This is the day the Lord spoke of when he said to you, I will give your enemy into your hands for you to deal with as you wish." Then David crept up unnoticed and cut off a corner of Saul's robe. And I'll leave you to imagination of how that happened. Did he leave the robe to the side as he went? Or was he wearing the robe and it was so long that he was able to just cut it off? I don't know. Somehow he was able to cut off the corner of the robe. And afterward, verse 5, it says, David was conscience-stricken for having cut off a corner of his robe. He said to his men, "The Lord forbid that I should do such a thing to my master. The Lord's anointed, or lay my hand on him, for he is the anointed of the Lord." With these words, David sharply rebuked his men and did not allow them to attack Saul. And Saul left the cave and went on his way. As I was reading this, I could only imagine what was happening. But I wish I was in that cave to witness David speaking these very words to his men. I would have loved to watch his facial expression and body language as he probably struggled between his human thoughts and the convictions from God. And we go through those moments all the time, don't we? I'm sure it was probably very tempting to just do whatever seemed okay at that moment. Because his men, they said, do and to deal with him as you wish. And in many ways, he had the right to do what he wanted to do at that moment. And no one could have stopped him. And no one would have blamed him for doing so, even if he went and killed Saul at that moment. But we know the story. Even in that moment, David chose to show mercy, even after all the evil that was done to him. Can you recall a time when you were mistreated? Or perhaps you received some unjust treatment by someone? How did you handle the situation? What would you do if you were in David's shoes? When I first joined, this whole passage remind me of this moment. When I first came to our church, which was 2005, I came because there was a pastor, Pastor Mo, many of you know him. I came to know him and he said, "Hey, I need some help, lead worship for our youth group." So I was ready to jump into ministry after 4 years of Bible college. So I said, "Okay, I can play the guitar, I can sing, I can help you." And I was so excited to join this church and participate in my first official ministry. And when I came to this church, my expectation was so high to just ride in the ministry and do everything that I was trained for. But the reality was very different. I came, and then a few months just went by without anyone really talking to me of my official role. And I was really confused. Why am I here? Like, what am I doing here? Am I here as a pastor? I had no introduction to the whole congregation other than saying hello to our youth group. Some of the people who are sitting here were there the first Friday night that I came. So I was introduced as a helper or pastor intern, right? So after a few months passed by, the supervisor at the time came and wanted to have a meeting. And I said, finally. And the first words that came out of the mouth was, we don't really need you here. You know how upset I was? I was so upset because not only I waited a few months of like not knowing what I'm doing here, and I couldn't walk away because I already said hi to the kids. You know, I just felt bad walking away. And during that time, I actually had an offer from a church down the street, Bethany, to work, and it was very appealing offer for me. But then because I already came to the church and said hello, I couldn't do it, so I had to turn that down and say, you know what, I can't do it at this time. And after a few months, and I hear these words, I'm like, what? What is happening here? You know what I did? Nothing. But I was really upset. I was really frustrated. See, I was so excited to jump into ministry, so you actually took some actions. After just having so much bitterness built up in me, I couldn't take it anymore. And I actually wrote a letter. I typed up a letter, and then I put it in the supervisor's mailbox. I don't know if Ki-young knows this story, you know. So I typed up a letter because I was taking a counseling class, and then in the midst of the counseling class, they actually had to like talk to me and then help me process my feelings and all that. And as a result, I said, you know what, maybe I should write a letter. Because, you know, I wasn't really good at confronting someone. So I wrote a letter, and then I put it in the mailbox. Guess what? Day after day, I'll walk by. It's the pastoral office right there. I walked by, the letter was still there. I was like, okay. And then after about a week, I don't know how much time went by, it was still there. You know what I did? I just took it back. And I think that's why I'm still here today, after 20 years. If that person read the letter, I would have been fired right away. If you kind of can guess who that person was. See, I really felt mistreated. I felt very disrespected. I felt like the church leadership, they weren't honoring me. But I think, as I think back to my story, I think God was protecting me by making sure that person doesn't read my letter. Because you know what happened actually? After a few months went by, the supervisor began to favor me so much, honor me, respected me. And now I look back, it was God's grace that I had a chance to process the feeling, even though I never got to confront the person of how I felt, how I was mistreated. I think God just dealt with it in a very different way. And I'm still here today. And just like me, many of us have a way of going about how we respond to these situations in life. Perhaps with anger. Perhaps we try our best to seek revenge or justice. And at times, we should. But in the right way, in the right attitude, it's going to require a lot of humbleness, a lot of prayer, a lot of fasting. And for me, when I went through that process, I didn't have that. I was just frustrated. I just want to express how frustrated I was. I don't even have a record of the letter. I wish I could find it. I'll be like laughing so loud if I read that letter today. But when we see the story today, David was very different. Something about David was so different. So for the rest of our time today, I want us to dive into the passage to see how David experienced victory in his inner battle. In many ways, I failed many times. In that one particular incident, and many times over the last 2 years at church, in the family, even with our kids, through different relationships. But David was able to experience victory in this particular battle that he fought, where he ultimately surrendered his feelings to the Lord, trusting God to bring justice rather than taking the matter into his own hands. So we see that here. His men thought this was a God-given opportunity. They actually used the name of God in the way they try to convince David, David, God gave you this opportunity to take revenge, to kill Saul. This is your moment. Do as you wish. And we know the answer. He didn't. But the question is, should we do as we wish? Should we always follow our feelings? Is that okay? Isn't the biblical teaching pretty clear about not following our heart, our feeling, going with the flow, not listening to the voice of the world? Because this world will tell you, you have the right. Do whatever you want. Take revenge. Speak up. Lash at them. And we often justify how we get things done, even if we handle things in a way that's contrary to God's command. We have this sense of entitlement. I am hurt. I was taken advantage of. I was mistreated, therefore I deserve to respond in this way. And God would understand. I understand the feelings, as I go through that feeling all the time. But let me tell you, Bible does not teach that. And we sing about that all the time, don't we? All the ways that we sin against the Lord, does God punish us accordingly? Doesn't God deserve to punish us every single moment when we go against the Lord? But He doesn't. He's so merciful, and we love that, we receive that, and yet we don't want to extend it to other people. Bible teaches us to turn the other cheek. Bible teaches us, if they ask to walk a mile, go extra mile. Isn't that the teachings of the Bible? And I believe David was obeying the voice of the Spirit rather than listening to other people, trying to convince him to do what's right for him. And I define this as reckless love. We sing about God's reckless love. It makes no sense. But oftentimes, we try to live our lives according to what makes sense to us. And we look at other people, we hear stories of other people who love beyond the norms of this society, and we say, wow, I wish I can live like that. I wish I can do that. I wish I can forgive. I wish I can extend same grace. See, verse 5, after David took an action to cut off a corner of Saul's robe, it says David was conscience-stricken. If I were him, that will be not the first thing that I'll think about. I'll be so upset and regret that I lost the golden opportunity to take revenge. But David was different. He was heartbroken because he attempted to harm the Lord's anointed. And that's why we label this man as a man after God's own heart. Something about his heart was different. I believe he was sensitive to the Spirit's guidance and conviction at every moment. And unlike David, you and I, many of us, our hearts can easily be affected by bad experiences and pains and the sins that we commit or sins done to us. And oftentimes one compromise leads to the next until we give in to what enemy wants. perhaps to habitual sin. And we let our hearts and minds become so insensitive to God. And Bible labels this heart as a heart of a stone. Heart of a stone. Stubborn, spiritually dead, unrepentant, and resistant to God's will and command. And in the Old Testament, we see God rebuking the Israelites for having such a heart of stone. And what does He say? But I will give you a new heart. New heart. That is the new covenant that God made with His people. The heart of stone that you have is not right for people of God. You need heart of flesh. A heart that is tender, responsive, and sensitive to my will, God's will and guidance. A heart after God's own heart. So today, I pray that God will give you and God will give us that kind of heart. David said, "The Lord forbid that I should do such a thing to my master." David showed respect. And this is Saul you're talking about, a man who attempted to kill you so many times. This is not just a mistreatment that I received. This man literally came after you with an army to kill you. And yet, David showed respect. And he turns to his men and he sharply rebuked them and restrained them from attacking Saul. And I was reminded of this passage in the Gospels, Matthew chapter 16, when Jesus rebuked Peter. Remember that time? Jesus rebuked Peter, Matthew chapter 16, verse 20 to 23, said what? "Get behind me, Satan. You are a stumbling block to me. You do not have in mind the concerns of God, but merely human concerns." Again, God thoughts versus human thoughts. What I deserve to do versus what God would like for me to do. Peter's intention was good. He did not want his master Jesus to go to the cross. And yet, he did not know that by doing so, he was attempting to override what God wanted to do in Jesus' life. I think it took a lot of courage and boldness for David to spare Saul. And that's an understatement. And to go against everyone's wishes. Because it wasn't just David who was on the run. Everyone in that cave, the people who followed David, they suffered. They put their lives on the line to follow David. So this meant not only for David to be free, but it was freedom for them as well. Ending Saul's life would have meant relief from all the life of running away from Saul. And perhaps a chance for them to rise to different life once David becomes the king. And David could have easily asked someone else to carry out the task. You know what? You're right. I think God is really giving me this chance. But you know what? I don't feel right doing this. Can you just do it? I think what David did in this cave is such a powerful picture of someone who stands up for what he believes and acts on Lord's conviction. Rather than giving into human thoughts and persuasion, he acted upon the conviction of the Lord. And that is the inner battle we're talking about today. I think David's men, they saw in David's eyes the godly determination as he made a painful decision to surrender his own pain and hurt and sorrow to the Lord, the feelings of revenge, anger, to ultimately say, God, I trust you. Trust your timing instead of taking this matter into my own hands. What a powerful picture of someone who can stand up for what he believes in. Not only David kept his conscience clean, but he kept his men from sinning against the Lord. What a leadership. What a love. He kept the men from sinning against the Lord's anointed. That's what we can do. That's who we can be in this world. As we make the determination to follow God no matter what. So the question is, why? Why did David do this? Go to this extent. It is clear in verse 6, he says, the Lord, the Lord, the Lord. The Lord's anointed. It wasn't because he respected Saul so much as a person. He knew ins and outs of Saul, how undeserving he was. But he did not take the matter into his own hands because of his reverence for God. The Lord, the Lord, the Lord. Because he knew rejecting and harming the Lord's anointed meant rejecting God. David knew more than anyone that Saul had to be removed. But he knew that decision was not his to make, but God's. How much are you willing to let God be God in your life before you take matters into your own hands? I struggle with that all the time. I share that with our journey group, our discipleship group all the time. I like taking control. I don't want to wait for God to move because I want to do it right now. But David is showing us a way, countercultural way, a different way, a faithful way, perhaps something that should be a way for all of us to follow, the way of Jesus. But let me say this so you don't misapply, because I know that sometimes people refer to this verse and say you should never speak against your leaders. I think that's a misunderstanding, misapplication. Because people use verses like this to protect themselves from making mistakes, to abuse their authority. What God prohibited was killing the Lord's anointed. Literally in this case, what David did not do was to kill the Lord's anointed, but he actually does confront Saul with sinful behaviors. No one should be above the law. No one should be above God's word. A leader should be accountable. So do not let anyone use verse like this to abuse their authority. But we need to do it in the right way. And we'll see that. And we'll wrap up today's message. David showed mercy, and yet he confronted Saul. Let's read how he went about it. Verse 8. Then David went out of the cave and called out to Saul, "My lord the king." When Saul looked behind him, David bowed down, prostrated himself with his face to the ground. He said to Saul, "Why do you listen to when men say David is bent on harming you? This day you have seen with your own eyes how the Lord delivered you into my hands in the cave. Some urged me to kill you, but I spared you. I said, I will not lay my hand on my Lord, because he is the Lord's anointed. See, my father, look at this piece of your robe in my hand. I cut off the corner of your robe, but did not kill you. See that there is nothing in my hand to indicate that I am guilty of wrongdoing or rebellion. I have not wronged you, but you're hunting me down to take my life. Verse 12, may the Lord judge between you and me, and may the Lord avenge the wrongs you have done to me, but my hand will not touch you. As the old saying goes, from evildoers come evil deeds, so my hand will not touch you. Against whom has the king of Israel come out? Who are you pursuing? A dead dog? A flea? May the Lord be our judge and decide between us. May he consider my cause and uphold it. May he vindicate me by delivering me from your hand. What a powerful moment. He approached it with such humble attitude. He literally bowed down, put his face to the ground. I don't think I can do that. I really don't think I can do that. To the people that I sometimes don't like inside church, when I see them, I would try to avoid them, go to the other hallway. You know, as a Korean, you bow. Maybe I'll just give like a, short bow or just kind of ignore them. But just imagine him just bowing down with a humble attitude. And he goes on to confront the wrong. We talk about speaking truth in love. I think this is a great example of speaking truth in love. If we can do this, go ahead, speak the truth. Oftentimes, we're so good at pointing out the sin without love, without respect, without humble attitude. I think we really need to check our heart. David was able to confront the sin without sinning. So do confront. Do bring up the issues. But do it without sinning. Do it in the way that's honoring to the Lord. He tells him, why do you listen to the words of men? People told me to kill you, but I spared you. And look at this piece of robe in my hand. I could have killed you, but I spared you. Do you remember when Saul was confronted by Samuel? And Samuel told him, God is going to take this kingdom away from you and give it to someone else. Remember, Saul clinged on to Samuel and Samuel's robe tore. And Samuel said, that's exactly what's going to happen. I think at this moment, Saul probably remembered as David is showing a piece of robe in his hand. I bet Saul probably remembered the words of Samuel and recognized what God is doing at the moment. And I think that's why Saul's response makes sense. And I'll have the worship team come up. Saul says in verse 17, you are more righteous than I. You have treated me well, but I have treated you badly. Verse 20, I know that you will surely be king and that the kingdom of Israel will be established in your hands. I don't think it was just a recognition of that moment, but I think there was something happening in him that God was convicting in his heart. You are more righteous than I. Brothers and sisters, we're living in a world where there's so much back and forth happening on social media. People don't know how to back down. People don't know how to respect one another, honor one another. We cannot let this world determine how we should respond to criticism, the hurts and the pain that we receive. We have to be above that. I know it's not easy. I know it's a divine calling. That's why today I'm going to invite us to sing this song together and ask God to empower us with a supernatural strength. It says in Romans chapter 12, verse 17 to 21, and this is the power of countercultural life, or you can call it reckless love. It says this, do not repay anyone evil for evil. Be careful to do what is right in the eyes of everyone. If it is possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. Do not take revenge, my dear friends, but leave room for God's wrath. For it is written, it is mine. It is mine to avenge. I will repay, says the Lord. On the contrary, if your enemy is hungry, feed him. If he is thirsty, give him something to drink. In doing this, you will heap burning coals on his head. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. Brothers and sisters, this is a calling that we must live out, especially in this world. Such a divided time. Left and right, conservative, moderate, progressive. So many different camps are fighting one another. I'm not asking you to compromise anything. David didn't. But he was able to approach this internal battle. Such humbleness. Not given to his human thoughts, but he followed God's will every moment. And as we'll find out, David was not perfect. He will give in to human desires. So I understand that we struggle time to time. But let this be a reminder one more time that we have a God who can help us. See, when it says, do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good, we don't have this good. You and I, we don't have what it takes to extend this good. We have to depend on God. The song that we will sing, it talks about how we're weak, but the Spirit that's inside of us is not. He will empower us. He will guide us. Let's all stand and sing this song.